A growing wave of defiance in Iran and beyond as thousands fled the streets of Tehran for the 9th day, with protests ignited over the death of a 22-year-old woman.
Iran's morality police arrested Mahsa Amini for allegedly not properly wearing the hijab headscarf. She suspiciously died in their custody shortly afterwards. As protests show no signs of letting up, the Islamic regime is cracking down. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with the latest. Caitlin, how is the government trying to silence those demonstrators?
Matt, Abigail, they're using a two-pronged approach of force and repression. Iranian police are in the streets trying to stop the protests. At least 41 people have been killed since the demonstrations began. And the regime has pulled the plug on the web and social media nationwide, a tactic they've seen success with before.
The pattern has been when the Iranian people get fed up and they take to the streets to protest the regime's policies. Immediately after, we see the regime use live ammunition against protesters, but also the regime cuts internet access.
The Iranian government shut off global internet access Wednesday for almost 80 million of its citizens. Still, outrage over the death of Mahsa Amini has only expanded. Iranian officials claim the 22-year-old died due to underlying health issues, but her family says that's not true. Now, thousands of brave Iranians continue to protest in her name, in some cases even driving back Iranian security forces. Women in acts of defiance burning their hijab or headscarves and cutting their hair. Across the globe, other protests erupting in solidarity.
I'm cutting my hair because many of my sisters in Iran, they gonna die.
President Biden himself weighed in last week at the United Nations.
We stand with the brave citizens and the brave women of Iran who right now are demonstrating to secure their basic rights.
The U.S. Treasury Department announced it would take action to expand internet services in Iran in an effort to support the free flow of information. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tweeting that a general license has been issued to provide the Iranian citizens greater access to digital communications. Elon Musk responding with, quote, activating Starlink.
Internet obviously is very important when protesters are trying to organize and also when they're trying to share footage with the outside world of what's going on. So Elon Musk giving Starlink to Iran would be a true game changer for the Iranian people, and I hope he does it.
According to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Starlink is in fact now active in Iran. In order for the satellite internet service to actually benefit the Iranian people, terminals need to be distributed on the ground. While that's something the Iranian government certainly would not support, it's considered a surmountable challenge. Abigail, Matt.
Here with us now is Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD. Behnam, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Faith Nation. So we'll just get right to it. If Elon Musk is able to get Starlink's satellite-based internet up and running enough to provide major internet services to Iran, how much of a game changer could that really be?
Well, pleasure to be with you both. In essence, satellite communication, satellite internet, and basically fostering the ability of Iranians to communicate better with one another inside country, as well as to share their messages, stories, as well as their plight with members of the international community, would be a game changer, would literally be a revolution, because it's not just Iranians that are suffering on the streets. It's Iranians that are suffering in cyberspace as well, because they can't get their message out, and because the regime is using an internet blackout, sometimes localized and sometimes nationwide, to prevent the Iranian people's plight from being heard by members of the international community. So if Starlink, both on the software side and hardware side, is set up and operational, it would be a game changer.
And Behnam, as the Iranian regime continues its crackdown on protesters, the White House is preparing to approve the transfer of $7 billion to Iran in exchange for the release of U.S. hostages. Could that incentivize the kidnapping of U.S. citizens?
You know, there's been a lot of issues with the Biden administration's Iran policy, and its potential to want to wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and continue to do diplomacy with the Islamic Republic and keep the door open for the resurrection of a fatally flawed nuclear deal, as well as pave the way for things that you mentioned, which could be paying essentially what amounts to ransom for the return of hostages would only incentivize further hostage taking, as well as the export of terrorism, as well as partaking in terrorism, are threats that are as old as the Islamic Republic itself, which emanate from Iran. So these are things that would be akin to shooting yourself in the foot morally and strategically.
Ben, you just sort of alluded to it, but is the U.S. sending mixed messages here on securing an Iran deal, and how is Iran reading them?
Well, ultimately, the message that the U.S. needs to understand and calibrate and fix and course correct is the message sent by itself, particularly itself over time. You know, the last time there was a democratic administration and major street protests in Iran, known as the Green Movement, in response to the stolen election of 2009, there were again millions of Iranians out into the streets, and Washington failed to heed their call. And indeed, then you did have the death of a young Iranian female on the streets, murdered at the hands of the cold blood of this regime. And fast forward many years later, you literally have quite again the same thing. And again, Washington's overriding interest, both then and now, seems to be keeping the door open for nuclear diplomacy with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. Again, that's a strategic and moral mistake, and one that can and should be fixed.
Yeah. Well, Ben, we're going to have to leave it there tonight, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.